There comes a moment, usually somewhere in the fifth decade of life, when you notice something. It is not dramatic. There is no pain, no event, no diagnosis. It is simply a quiet awareness that your body does not bounce back the way it once did. A night of poor sleep lingers for days. A weekend of activity requires a longer recovery. The small efforts of life begin to feel like they cost more than they used to. Most people, when they notice this, assume it is simply the price of getting older. They accept it as inevitable. But here is what the research actually shows. That feeling of decline is not aging itself. It is the accumulation of thousands of small conversations between your body and your life. Conversations you did not realize you were having. And once you understand the language your body has been speaking all along, everything shifts. Not because you can stop time, but because you finally know which choices are actually shaping your future. You are listening to the Longevity Library, where we archive the wisdom of healthy aging. The long view. Understanding health across the decades. There is a question that eventually arrives for most people, usually sometime after 50. It arrives quietly, often in an unguarded moment, perhaps while walking the dog at dawn, or sitting with a cup of tea after everyone else has left the room. The question is simple, and it has been asked in every language, in every century, by every generation that has lived long enough to wonder, how do I want the rest of my life to feel? This is not the same as asking how long you want to live. That question, while natural, misses something essential. Longevity, considered alone, is merely a measure of time. What people are really asking, when they sit quietly with that question, is something deeper. They are asking whether the years ahead will be years of capacity or limitation. Whether the body will cooperate with the life they still want to live. Whether the gradual accumulation of days will bring wisdom and ease, or simply accumulate. The study of how people age well, not just long, but well, has revealed something encouraging. The way we move through our later decades is not written entirely in our genes. It is shaped by patterns. Patterns of movement, patterns of rest, patterns of nourishment, patterns of attention. These patterns, accumulated over years, create a kind of momentum. And momentum, whether it carries us toward vitality or toward decline, is something we participate in creating. Day by day, what follows is an examination of those patterns, not as prescriptions, not as rigid rules, but as observations gathered from populations who have aged unusually well, from research that has tracked thousands of lives over decades, and from the quiet wisdom of people who have simply paid attention to how their own bodies respond to the way they live. The body's silent conversation with time. To understand aging, it helps to understand something about how the body communicates. Most of this communication happens below the level of awareness. You do not feel your cells repairing themselves overnight. You do not hear the subtle signals your muscles send requesting more blood flow during a walk. You do not notice, in any direct way, the gradual accumulation of inflammatory substances that accompanies a diet high in processed foods. The body speaks in whispers, for a very long time, before it finally raises its voice. This is why aging can feel sudden, even when it is not. The person who wakes up one morning with stiff joints that never quite loosen has been having a conversation with their body for years. The joints have been sending signals. The body has been requesting different kinds of movement, different kinds of fuel. But the signals were quiet, easily ignored in the press of daily life. Until one morning, they are not quiet anymore. The biological processes underlying this conversation are complex, but they can be understood in simple terms. Two of the most important are inflammation and cellular energy production. Inflammation, in its original purpose, is a healing response. When you cut your finger, the area becomes red, warm, and swollen. This is inflammation at work, increased blood flow bringing immune cells to fight infection and begin repair. This acute inflammation is temporary and resolves when healing is complete. But there is another kind of inflammation that has become increasingly common in modern life. It is low-grade, systemic, and persistent. It does not announce itself with redness or swelling. It simmers in the background, quietly damaging tissues, interfering with normal cellular function, and contributing to the gradual breakdown of systems throughout the body. This chronic inflammation is associated with diet, with stress, with insufficient movement, with poor sleep, and with exposure to various environmental factors. The second key process involves the tiny structures inside cells called mitochondria. These are the power plants of the body, converting nutrients into the energy that fuels every cellular function. As people age, mitochondrial function can decline. Power plants become less efficient. Cells do not get the energy they need to perform repairs, to chew waste products, to communicate effectively with neighboring cells. This decline in energy production is not something you feel directly, but its effects accumulate. What connects these processes is that both are heavily influenced by lifestyle. Chronic inflammation and mitochondrial decline are not simply fate. They are shaped, for better or worse, by how people live. This is the deeper meaning of the body's silent conversation. It is constantly responding to what you eat, how you move, whether you sleep, how you handle stress. The responses are subtle at first, but over decades, they accumulate into the reality of how you feel each morning when you swing your legs out of bed. Movement as a conservation strategy. There is a persistent misunderstanding about physical activity and aging. Many people, observing that the body tires more easily than it once did, conclude that the appropriate response is to do less, to conserve energy, to avoid putting strain on aging joints and muscles. This instinct is understandable, but it reverses the actual relationship between movement and capacity. The body does not conserve its abilities through rest. It conserves them through use. What is not used, at any age, is gradually lost. But this principle becomes more consequential with each passing decade, because the losses are harder to regain. Consider what happens to muscle tissue. After about age 30, adults who do not engage in regular strength-preserving activity lose approximately 3 to 5% of their muscle mass per decade. This process, called sarcopenia, accelerates after 60. The lost muscle is not simply about appearance or strength. Muscle tissue is metabolically active. It helps regulate blood sugar. It provides the structural support that protects joints. It enables the thousands of small movements that constitute an independent life, carrying groceries, getting up from a low chair, lifting a grandchild, steadying yourself on uneven ground. The loss of muscle is not inevitable. It is a response to a signal the body receives. The signal is, we do not need this anymore. When you stop challenging your muscles, when you stop asking them to generate force, the body, ever efficient, begins to dismantle what it perceives as unnecessary tissue. The resources that maintain that muscle are redirected elsewhere. The message is sent by inactivity. The only way to counter it is to send a different message. This is where the concept of mechanical loading becomes relevant. Muscles and bones respond to the demands placed upon them. When you lift something heavy, when you push against resistance, when you bear weight through your skeleton, you are sending a signal. We need to maintain the capacity to do this. The body responds by preserving, and sometimes even building, the tissues required. For people in their 50s and beyond, the most important form of movement may be the one most often neglected: resistance training. This does not necessarily mean lifting heavy weights in a gym, though that is one option. It means any activity that requires muscles to generate force against resistance. Carrying firewood, lifting bags of potting soil, using resistance bands, practicing yoga, which uses body weight as resistance, climbing stairs, getting down on the floor and back up again, which requires strength, coordination, and mobility all at once. Equally important is movement that challenges balance. The fear of falling, which becomes more common with age, is rational. Falls are a major source of injury and loss of independence. But the way to prevent falls is not to move less. It is to practice the systems that keep you upright. Walking on uneven ground. Standing on one foot while brushing your teeth. Tai Chi, which is essentially the practice of deliberate weight shifting. These activities train the complex interplay of sensory input, reflexes, and muscle coordination that prevents falls. They keep the system online. Walking itself deserves mention, not as exercise, but as a foundational practice. Humans are built for endurance walking. The ability to cover distance on foot is one of the species' defining characteristics. A daily walk, at whatever pace feels appropriate, serves multiple functions. It maintains the cardiovascular system. It exposes joints to the lubricating effects of movement. It provides sensory input from the environment. It shifts mental states. And it does all of this with a low risk of injury, making it perhaps the most sustainable form of movement across the entire lifespan. The key insight is that movement is not something you do in addition to living. It is the way you tell your body that you are still here, still engaged, still needing the capacities that allow a full life. The body listens. It responds to what you ask of it. The fuel question: food is information. This is not a metaphor. Every bite you take contains compounds that interact with your cells, your genes, your hormones, your immune system. These interactions shape, over time, how your body functions and how it ages. The modern food environment presents a challenge that no previous generation has faced. Highly processed foods, engineered to be palatable and shelf-stable, now constitute a majority of calories consumed in many populations. These foods are not merely lacking in beneficial compounds. They actively promote the low-grade inflammation discussed earlier. They disrupt the normal signaling systems that tell you when you are full. They deliver large amounts of sugar and refined carbohydrates that spike blood glucose and challenge the body's energy-regulating systems. Observing populations that age well reveals different patterns. The traditional diets of people in regions with high concentrations of healthy elders, places like Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Italy, Ikaria in Greece, vary in their specific foods, but share common characteristics. They are built around plants. They include fish and meat, but in smaller quantities than modern industrial diets. They feature fermented foods that support the community of microorganisms living in the digestive tract. They are low in added sugars and refined grains. They are, in essence, anti-inflammatory by default, because they consist of whole foods that humans have eaten for thousands of years. The mechanisms through which diet influences aging are multiple. One of the most studied involves a compound called insulin-like growth factor 1, or IGF-1. This hormone is essential for growth and development in youth. But later in life, persistently high levels are associated with accelerated aging and increased risk for certain age-related conditions. Diets that are high in protein and calories tend to keep IGF-1 elevated. Diets that are more moderate, particularly in animal protein, tend to result in lower levels. Another mechanism involves the gut microbiome, the vast collection of bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms living in the digestive tract. Research has revealed that these organisms are not passive passengers. They actively influence inflammation, nutrient absorption, immune function, and even brain health. A diet rich in diverse plant fibers feeds a diverse and beneficial microbiome. A diet low in fiber and high in processed foods starves beneficial bacteria and allows less desirable species to proliferate. The practical question: for someone seeking to eat in a way that supports healthy aging, is not which specific diet to follow. It is which patterns to emphasize. Observational research suggests several that appear consistently in populations that age well. First, eat mostly plants, vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts, seeds. These foods provide fiber, vitamins, minerals, and thousands of phytochemicals with anti-inflammatory properties. They are also relatively low in calories, which matters because the body's energy requirements decrease somewhat with age, even as its need for nutrients does not. Second, include fermented foods, yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, and similar foods provide live microorganisms that can support the gut microbiome. The traditional diets of many healthy aging populations feature some form of fermented food consumed regularly. Third, be thoughtful about protein. Maintaining muscle mass requires adequate protein intake, particularly as people age and the body becomes somewhat less efficient at using dietary protein. But the source matters. Plant proteins from beans and lentils, fish, moderate amounts of dairy and eggs, and smaller amounts of meat. This pattern appears in many healthy aging populations. Fourth, eat with awareness of how food makes you feel. This seems obvious, but it is easily lost in a culture of distracted eating. Paying attention to how different foods affect your energy, your digestion, your mental clarity, and your sense of well-being provides information that no study can offer. The body's responses are individual. Learning to notice them is a form of self-knowledge that becomes more valuable with age. Sleep as restoration. There was a time, not long ago, when sleeping less was considered a virtue. The cultural ideal was the person who functioned on minimal sleep, who burned the midnight oil, who rose before dawn to conquer the day. This ideal, whatever its merits for productivity, runs counter to everything biology tells us about what sleep does. During sleep, the brain performs essential maintenance. It consolidates memories, processing the experiences of the day and deciding what to keep. It clears waste products that accumulate during waking hours, including substances that, if allowed to build up, are associated with neurological decline. The glymphatic system, discovered relatively recently, is the brain's waste clearance mechanism, and it operates primarily during deep sleep. Sleep is also when the body performs much of its physical repair. Growth hormone, which supports tissue maintenance and muscle preservation, is released primarily during sleep. The cardiovascular system slows down and recovers. The immune system carries out functions that are difficult to perform when the body is awake and active. For people in midlife and beyond, sleep often becomes more fragmented. The reasons are multiple. Hormonal changes can disrupt sleep patterns. Chronic pain can make it difficult to find comfortable positions. The need to urinate during the night becomes more common. Anxiety and rumination, which may increase with life's accumulated responsibilities and losses, can make it hard to quiet the mind. These challenges are real, but they do not change the fundamental requirement. Sleep is not optional. It is not a luxury. It is the primary period of restoration for brain and body. When sleep is consistently insufficient or poor quality, the effects accumulate. Cognitive function declines. Mood becomes more volatile. Inflammation increases. The body's ability to regulate blood sugar is impaired. The very processes that protect against age-related decline are compromised. What can be done is not necessarily to force sleep. which tends to backfire, but to create conditions that invite it. Regularity matters. Going to bed and waking at similar times helps anchor the body's internal clock. Light exposure matters. Bright light in the morning helps set the circadian rhythm, while dimming lights in the evening signals that rest approaches. The temperature of the room matters. Sleep begins most easily when the body's core temperature drops slightly. The mental environment matters. Worrying about sleep while lying in bed creates an association between bed and wakefulness, which is why getting up and doing something calming when unable to sleep can be more helpful than lying there frustrated. Sleep is also affected by what happens during the day. Physical activity promotes deeper sleep. Time outdoors, exposed to natural light, strengthens circadian rhythms. Managing stress through whatever means work for an individual, conversation, exercise, meditation, time in nature, reduces the mental arousal that interferes with rest. The goal is not perfect sleep every night, which is unrealistic at any age. The goal is to create conditions that support good sleep on most nights, and to accept that some nights will be restless without panicking about it. The relationship with sleep, like the relationship with the body more generally, benefits from patience and consistency rather than perfectionism. The balance of the nervous system. The human nervous system evolved in an environment that was, by modern standards, quiet. Threats were intermittent and usually short-lived. A predator appeared. The fight or flight response activated. The threat was resolved or escaped, and the system returned to baseline. This cycle repeated, but with periods of calm in between. The modern environment is different. The threats are not predators, but chronic stressors, financial pressure, work demands, family obligations, social conflict, news cycles designed to provoke alarm. These stressors do not resolve quickly. They persist, and the nervous system responds to them as if they were physical threats, activating the same fight or flight response, but without the resolution that allows the system to return to calm. The result is that many people spend most of their waking hours, and even some of their sleeping hours, in a state of low-grade sympathetic activation. The nervous system is primed for action, even when no action is required. Muscles hold residual tension. Heart rate and blood pressure remain slightly elevated. Stress hormones circulate at levels that, while not acutely dangerous, create chronic wear and tear on multiple body systems. This state has a name in the research literature: allostatic load. It refers to the cumulative burden of chronic stress on the body. High allostatic load is associated with accelerated aging, cognitive decline, cardiovascular disease, and a host of other negative outcomes. It is, in essence, the price paid for a nervous system that cannot find its way back to rest. The counterpart to the sympathetic fight or flight system is the parasympathetic system, often summarized as rest and digest. This is the system that slows heart rate, lowers blood pressure, directs blood flow to digestive organs, and supports repair processes. It is the system of calm, of restoration, of the body at ease. Activating the parasympathetic system is not something that happens automatically in modern life. It requires intention. It requires activities that signal safety to the nervous system. For some, this is time in nature, where the absence of human-made threats and the presence of ancient patterns of light and sound allow the nervous system to settle. For others, it is time with loved ones, in conversations that do not require vigilance or performance. For many, it is some form of meditative practice, not necessarily formal meditation, but any activity that focuses attention in a way that quiets the mental noise. Breathing deserves special mention here because it is the one aspect of the autonomic nervous system that can be consciously controlled. Slow, deep breathing, particularly with an exhalation longer than the inhalation, directly stimulates the vagus nerve, the primary nerve of the parasympathetic system. This is not a mystical claim. It is physiology. The mechanical action of the diaphragm during deep breathing activates neural pathways that signal safety to the brain and body. What this means in practical terms is that the ability to shift the nervous system toward calm is available at any moment. A few slow breaths before responding to a stressful email. A pause to breathe deeply when you notice your shoulders are up around your ears. A few minutes of slow breathing before bed. These are not major interventions, but they accumulate. Each time you activate the parasympathetic system, you are reminding your body what calm feels like. You are reducing allostatic load. You are participating in your own regulation. The web of connection. There is a finding from longevity research that surprises many people. When researchers study populations with exceptional life expectancy and health span, they find that one of the most powerful predictors is not diet, not exercise, not genetics. It is social connection. The original studies of the 7 Countries Project, which examined heart disease rates across different populations, found that the small town of Roseto, Pennsylvania, had dramatically lower rates of heart disease than neighboring towns, despite similar diets and similar levels of traditional risk factors. The explanation that emerged was social. Roseto was an Italian-American community with strong family ties, frequent social gatherings, and a culture of looking out for one another. The protective effect of this social fabric was measurable. More recent research has confirmed and extended this finding. Loneliness and social isolation are associated with increased inflammation, higher rates of cardiovascular disease, faster cognitive decline, and earlier mortality. The effect sizes are comparable to those of smoking, obesity, and physical inactivity. Social connection is not merely pleasant. It is physiologically protective. The mechanisms are multiple. Social support buffers the effects of stress. Knowing that others have your back changes how your nervous system responds to challenges. Social engagement provides cognitive stimulation, conversation, shared activities. Navigating relationships all keep the brain active. Social connection encourages healthy behaviors. People embedded in communities tend to take better care of themselves, partly because they are observed and partly because they have reasons to stay healthy. And there may be direct effects of positive social interaction on the immune system and on inflammation. For people in midlife and beyond, maintaining social connection requires attention. The structures that facilitated connection in earlier decades, work, children's activities, neighborhood life, often become less central. Friends may move away. Family members may be busy with their own lives. The initiative to maintain connection shifts from external structures to internal motivation. This is not always easy. It requires reaching out, making plans, showing up, even when you do not feel like it. It requires tolerating the awkwardness of new relationships. It requires investing in existing relationships even when they have their difficulties. But the research suggests that this investment matters. The effort to maintain connection is not just for others. It is for yourself. It is part of how you stay healthy. The forms of connection vary. For some, it is family, regular meals with children and grandchildren, phone calls with siblings, care for aging parents. For others, it is friendship, book clubs, walking groups, regular dinners with friends. For many, it is community, religious congregations, volunteer work, neighborhood associations, hobby groups. What matters is not the specific form, but the presence of regular, meaningful contact with others who know you and care about you. There is also a dimension of connection that extends beyond immediate social circles. A sense of purpose, of being part of something larger than oneself. People who feel that their lives have meaning, that they have reasons to get up in the morning, tend to fare better across multiple measures of health. This sense of purpose can come from many sources: work, family, creative expression, spiritual practice, service to others. What matters is its presence. It organizes attention and motivation. It provides reasons to take care of yourself. The built world and the natural world. Humans evolved in an environment that looked very different from the one most now inhabit. For the vast majority of human history, people lived outdoors, moved over varied terrain, ate what grew locally, and experienced cycles of light and dark that followed the sun. The modern built environment is a recent experiment, and the body has not fully adapted to it. Consider light. The sun produces light that is full spectrum, bright, and variable. Indoor lighting is dimmer by orders of magnitude and often lacks the full spectrum. Looking at screens after dark exposes the eyes to blue wavelengths that signal the brain to suppress melatonin and stay alert. This is not how human visual systems evolved to function, and the mismatch has consequences for sleep, mood, and perhaps for long-term health. Consider movement. The modern environment is designed for efficiency: chairs that support us in seated positions, transportation that requires minimal exertion, surfaces that are flat and predictable. This efficiency removes the incidental movement that was once part of daily life: walking to the well, carrying water, climbing hills, squatting to tend fires, walking over uneven ground. This loss of low-intensity movement throughout the day may be as significant as the loss of dedicated exercise. Consider food. The modern food environment offers calories that are dense, cheap, and engineered to be irresistible. The variety of edible plants available in a traditional environment, each with its own season and its own preparation requirements, has been replaced by a handful of commodity crops processed into thousands of products. The signals that once guided eating, seasonal availability, the work required to obtain food, the natural limits on how much could be stored, have been overwhelmed. The built environment also shapes social connection. Suburban development patterns that separate housing from commerce from community spaces reduce casual encounters. Time spent in cars, in front of screens, in isolated housing units is time not spent in spontaneous interaction with neighbors. The design of where and how we live influences, subtly but powerfully, how much contact we have with others. What this means is that health is not just a matter of personal choices. It is shaped by the environments in which those choices are made. Someone living in a walkable neighborhood with access to fresh food and nearby parks will find it easier to maintain healthy patterns than someone living in a food desert with no safe places to walk. This is not an excuse, but an observation. It suggests that improving health sometimes requires changing environments, not just exhorting individuals. For those who have some control over their immediate environment, small modifications can make a difference. Keeping fresh food visible and processed food out of sight. Setting up a space for movement at home. Using blackout curtains and dimming lights in the evening. Getting outside, ideally early in the day, to expose the eyes to natural light. Creating a front porch or a garden that encourages interaction with neighbors. These are not grand interventions, but they shape the conditions of daily life. And daily life shapes health. The accumulation of small choices. There is a tendency, when considering all of this information, to feel overwhelmed. Movement, nutrition, sleep, stress, connection, environment. The list of factors seems endless. How is anyone supposed to manage all of this? The answer is that you are not supposed to manage all of it at once. You are not supposed to become a different person overnight. The patterns that shape aging are not built in a day. They are built over decades, through thousands of small choices, most of which are not even noticed at the time. The person who reaches 80 with good mobility did not become that way through a single heroic effort. They became that way through 1,000 small decisions. To take the stairs, to park farther from the store, to stand up and stretch every hour, to garden on Saturday instead of watching television, to walk after dinner instead of sitting on the couch. Each decision, by itself, was trivial, accumulated. They created a body that could still move. The person who reaches 80 with sharp mind did not achieve it through brain training apps alone. They achieved it through a lifetime of reading, of conversation, of learning new things, of paying attention, through work that required thought, relationships that required understanding, challenges that required problem solving, through staying curious when it would have been easier to stop paying attention. The person who reaches 80 with a sense of peace did not avoid difficulty. They learned, over many years, how to relate to difficulty. They learned that some things cannot be controlled and that fighting them only creates more suffering. They learned to find meaning in small pleasures, in relationships, in the simple fact of being alive. They learned, gradually, how to let go. This is the deeper truth about aging well. It is not about following a protocol or optimizing every variable. It is about the gradual accumulation of patterns that serve you. It is about learning, over time, what your body needs and what your mind needs and what your spirit needs, and finding ways to provide those things. Most of the time, without turning it into another project. The research provides guideposts. It tells us what patterns appear consistently in people who age well. But it cannot tell you exactly how to apply those patterns to your own life. Because your life is yours. Your body is yours. Your circumstances are yours. The work of integrating these insights into a life that feels like your own is work that only you can do. Living with what comes. There is another dimension of aging that research cannot fully capture. It is the dimension of acceptance, of learning to live with what cannot be changed. No amount of healthy living will prevent all difficulties. Bodies age. Capacities change. People you love get sick and die. Your own body will eventually fail you, no matter how well you treat it. This is not pessimism. It is simply reality. The question is not whether you will face difficulties. The question is how you will meet them. Will you meet them with resistance and bitterness, fighting against what cannot be fought, or will you meet them with some measure of acceptance, some ability to adapt, some capacity to find meaning even in limitation? This is where the various strands of healthy aging come together. The person who has learned to listen to their body is better prepared when their body begins to change. The person who has cultivated social connection has support when difficulties arise. The person who has developed practices for calming the nervous system has resources for facing fear and uncertainty. The person who has found a sense of purpose has reasons to keep going, even when going is hard. These capacities are not developed overnight. They are developed over a lifetime, through the same small choices that shape physical health. Each time you choose to respond to stress with a few deep breaths instead of immediate reactivity, you are building a capacity. Each time you reach out to a friend when you would rather isolate, you are building a capacity. Each time you notice something beautiful and allow yourself to appreciate it, you are building a capacity. These capacities do not prevent difficulty, but they shape how you move through it. They determine whether difficulty breaks you or whether you find a way to bend without breaking, to adapt, to continue. The view from here, standing in midlife or beyond, looking forward, it is natural to wonder what the coming decades will bring. The uncertainty can be unsettling. But uncertainty is not the same as powerlessness. The patterns you establish now, the capacities you build now, the relationships you nurture now, these will shape what is possible in the years ahead. The research on healthy aging is encouraging. not because it promises perfect health or endless life, but because it shows that how you live matters. The choices you make today are not just for today. They are investments in the person you will become. They are conversations with your future self. That future self will thank you for the walks you took, even when you did not feel like it. They will thank you for the vegetables you ate, for the sleep you prioritized, for the friends you stayed in touch with, for the moments of calm you carved out of busy days. They will thank you for not giving up, for continuing to learn, for staying engaged with life. And they will also understand that you could not do everything perfectly, that you had to make compromises, that life is complicated and demands are many. They will understand because they will be you, with all your history, all your struggles, all your humanity. They will know that you did your best, most of the time, with what you had. The goal is not perfection. The goal is to keep showing up, to keep making small choices that point in the right direction, to keep learning and adapting and staying connected to what matters. The goal is to live in a way that, when you look back from the end, you can feel that you participated fully in your own life. This is what the study of healthy aging ultimately reveals. It is not about living forever. It is about living fully, for as long as you live. It is about meeting each decade with whatever resources you have, and continuing to grow, and continuing to find meaning, and continuing to be present for the life that is yours. The research provides guidance. The rest is up to you. And that, in the end, is the encouraging part. You are not a passive passenger on this journey. You are an active participant. The choices are yours. The life is yours. And there is still time, plenty of time, to make choices that your future self will thank you for. The research on healthy aging points to one truth that transcends all the details. How you live matters, not because it guarantees any particular outcome, but because it shapes what is possible. The choices you make today are conversations with your future self. They are investments in the person you will become. And that future self will thank you for the walks you took, the connections you maintained, the moments of calm you carved out of busy days, and the willingness to keep learning. Keep adapting. Keep showing up for your own life. If something in this hour resonated with you, if it sparked a thought or raised a question, we would welcome hearing about it in the comments. And if you would like to continue exploring this library of wisdom, we invite you to look through the other videos here and to subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. This is the Longevity Library. Listen, learn, and live longer.